What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to another edition of Dream Firm Spotlight, and I could not be more excited to introduce to you a CPA so prolific in his content production that he had to start a second company to handle his high quality lead flow. More about that a little bit later. A tax planner so dynamic, he works with one of the most influential financial voices of our time. A lot more on that a little bit later. The host of two popular podcasts, The Wealthability Show with Tom Wheelwright, The Wealthability Show for CPAs, and a best-selling author with his must-read book, Tax-Free Wealth. If you haven't read it, you got to get it on Amazon. It's a category king, absolutely killer. He's got another one that's coming out that is going to be another category king. We're going to talk a lot about that book in just a little bit here. It is an honor and a pleasure to introduce to you the tax planning prodigy, the prolific content producer in the accounting space, the humble and yet thoughtful Tom Wheelwright. Tom, it's an absolute pleasure. How are you doing today, my friend?
Tyler, I got to tell you, that's one of the best introductions I've ever had. Thank you. That was great.
My pleasure. I would be happy to be your hype man at your next event. Just let me know and I'll fly out.
Absolutely. You're in.
Awesome. Well, listen, I know we've got a lot to cover in a relatively short period of time, but what I love to always start with is the beginnings. When we look at someone like you and we can say thought leader, when we can say best-selling author, when we can say CPA to one of the best financial voices of our time, author of Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I mean, come on, this is incredible stuff. But we all start somewhere. And when we talked about this way back when we first started talking, I said, how'd you get started with all of this? You've got a really interesting origin story. And if you could just give us some insights on that, we'd love to hear it.
Yeah, just a little bit of background. So I grew up in Salt Lake City, Utah, which was great because that meant that I got to be a Mormon missionary when I was 19 years old. And I learned how to get rejected in French as I was a missionary in Paris. And that was an amazing training ground, absolutely amazing training ground. From there, I spent a couple of years at the University of Utah and then another couple of years at the University of Texas for a graduate degree in tax. And then I went to the Big Four. So I spent 7 years with Ernst & Young, 3 years in the National Tax Office. I spent then the next 4 years as the in-house tax advisor for a Fortune 1000 company. I spent 14 years as an adjunct professor at the Masters of Tax program at Arizona State University, 25 years buying, building, selling CPA firms, learning it the hard way. And last 15 years, I spent a lot of time on the road with, as you refer to, Mr. Kiyosaki, traveling around the world, speaking on financial education. I mean, Romania to China to Singapore, Australia, everywhere. We've literally been pretty much everywhere. And then, like you said, about 5 years ago, we decided rather than, we figured out what we were good at. We're not good at running a big CPA firm. And so we sold that big CPA firm. And what we really liked doing was we liked education and marketing. So we started a new company, Wealthability, that basically does education and marketing to entrepreneurs. Of course, the biggest challenge we get is that the entrepreneurs all want a CPA like me, right? They say, "Oh, how do we get this? How do we get this from our CPA?" And so what we decided was, well, let's just create a network of CPAs. And so then we tell the entrepreneur, well, you've got a choice. You can either, if you don't like your CPA, we'll find you a CPA. If you do like your CPA, we'll train your CPA. So it's kind of a nice model for us. I get to work back in the accounting industry. I haven't done that for a long time. I've been very focused on entrepreneurs and investors. And it's kind of fun to get back and get to know people like you in the accounting industry who are making such a big difference.
Yeah, and look, that's there's so many great things to pull from that. And again, I want to be cognizant of our time here, but main things here is a lot of rich experience directly in the accounting space, going from kind of that traditional track of really being in that big firm environment to then transitioning to your own firm. And then also now having this tremendous opportunity to really travel the world and become this speaker in all of these different areas and really just kind of have this, I'll say, global recognition, which is super rare for an accounting professional, a thought leader to have in general. Forget accounting, just thought leader in general. That's amazing. And I think if there's one thing that I would imagine most people are really curious about, everyone wants to talk about premium clients. Everyone wants to talk about working with their dream clients. Everyone wants to talk about getting paid more. But when you're talking about working with one of the most influential thought leaders in finance and being able to have that person as a part of your client roster list, tell me about just kind of the first interactions with Robert Kiyosaki, and then how you ultimately ended up being the one that was selected out of all the potential people that could help him from an accounting and tax standpoint. I mean, that to me would be super valuable to better understand.
Robert likes to say that we get good partners from bad partners. And that's what happened with Robert, is that he had an accountant, and the accountant was was on his stage and had written a very popular book, and felt like she was a star in her own right. And so she decided to sell her CPA firm, and she decided that she would go off and be a speaker, which was interesting. One of her clients was Robert Kiyosaki. And but I think the more important story here is how I came to buy that CPA firm. And because what had happened is I'd split up with a partner, and I had a bad partner, and I'd split up with his partner, and all of the staff had stayed with me, and about 60% of the clients had stayed with me. So kind of gives you an idea of the reason we might have split up. Anyway, so we had this choice. So I one of my managers, I asked her to be my partner because I like having partners, and she was brilliant. She still is. She's still my partner 20 years later. And I asked my partner, and I said, "Look, we've got all the staff. We've trained them. Do we really want to?" What most accountants would do is they'd fire half the staff, right? Because you only have half the work. Well, we decided, well, we've got staff. Why don't we just get more work? That's not that hard. So we went out looking to acquire a CPA firm, and actually it was literally a piece of junk mail in the mail that said CPA firms for sale. And I called, and this was one of them. So wow. literally it was from a direct mail campaign, which is how I found it. And I was just looking. I really think it goes to Tyler, you find what you're looking for, and you don't find it if you're not looking for it.
It's perfectly well said. And that's very interesting that he was part of an acquisition and he moved over to you and your firm. I understood that correctly, right? In other words,
yeah, interesting. Not immediately. For a while, she continued serving him. But things didn't work out so well. And he's a very brave guy. I mean, I remember going to the first Rich Dad event that I went to was probably in 2002. And I went he brings me up on stage. She was supposed to be there, his former accountant, and she decided not to go, which was probably the end of their relationship. But he just brought me up on stage, said, explain depreciation. And he'd never heard me speak. He had no idea that I had, 20 years of training, speaking training, and just said, I need somebody to talk about this. And here's my new accountant. And that was it. So.
What a wild story. And look, there's a lot of people would say you're lucky, right? But luck is when preparation meets opportunity. And to your point, right, preparing 20 years, working on your speaking skills, even going back to your missionary experience. Yep. And then all of a sudden you look at this, piece of junk mail, you take a flyer on it, you get this firm, all of a sudden you now have this opportunity with someone that maybe previously would have been harder to attract. And now they're in your wheelhouse. Now you're at their event. Now you're on stage. And now you're here. And now I'd like to really fast forward the clock a little bit and talk more about where you are today, not just because of that relationship. And I don't like to assign undue credit, but you wrote a book, and now you have another one coming out. Before we talk about the new one, which I'm really, really excited to talk about, I want to talk about the book that came right before this one, which has been what I refer to as a category king in your opener. I have personally read this book. I read this book before I was just looking up all the things I could about tax savings in general, about influencers in the accounting space. And you were the first person at the top of that list. I said, I got to read this book. It's a great read. But tell me about what started your first book and really why, like, tell me just a little bit about your writing process and maybe how it's evolved to now your second book.
Yeah, sure. Happy to. So it actually started with the 2008, 2009 recession. That's actually where it came from, because I started looking at what was going on. We saw this, these huge stimulus packages coming in. We'd never seen stimulus like this before. I mean, since then, the COVID stimulus dwarfs that kind of stuff, right? But we'd never seen stimulus like that before. And I'm going, that's really interesting. That's really what the tax law does. The tax law is really a series of stimulus packages. And I remember very clearly, and interestingly enough, several other people remember this same event, including Robert. And I was on stage with Robert at the Paris in Las Vegas. And we had about 200 people in the audience. And he asked me to just talk about the tax law. And I said, well, the tax law is really a series of stimulus packages for entrepreneurs and investors. And he looks at me and you could just see the light bulb go on. And he goes, really? And I said, absolutely. And ever since then, we just have traveled all over the place. So, I grew up being the positive kid. I've always seen the world through rose-colored glasses. And so for me, I've always wanted to make, when I look at taxes, I always look at them as, how do I make taxes positive? Taxes are so negative, not just for entrepreneurs and taxpayers, but for CPAs. They're so negative. So many CPAs I find are scared to death of the IRS. And I'm going, I tell people, I'll be frank. If your accountant is scared of the IRS, you need a new accountant. I mean, that is just, let's be honest. The best and the brightest don't go to the IRS. Okay. So if your accountant is afraid of the IRS, then wow, that says something about your accountant to me. Okay. To me, that's how I feel about it. I've never had an issue with IRS audits. I'm very good at handling them. One of my little weird skill sets. But I really believe that you have to take a position on your subject. And I took a position that was very unusual, if not unique, where I said, well, look, taxes are a series of incentives. That's what they are. And if you look at the law, I mean, let's face it, 99% of the tax law is a roadmap to reducing your taxes. So, I'm a student of the tax law. I'm a tax nerd. I love the tax law. I read the tax law constantly. I'm always reading updates. My wife's a CPA. She reads the updates. You can imagine we have fascinating breakfast conversations and dinner conversations. During COVID, we had all those different tax law changes, right? 5 or 6 changes within a couple of years. And it was, to me, that was one of the most fun times of my entire career. Other people said this was horrible, just we had too much to do, all this kind of stuff. And I'm going, this is so much fun. We have all these changes going on, this whole metamorphosis. So when I wrote Tax-Free Wealth, I just go, well, look, let's write it from that perspective. Let's write it from a way to build wealth as opposed to something, that are loopholes. There's a previous book that was out there called Loopholes of the Rich. I'm going, I hate that term. That implies that they're accidents or that they're just lobbying, right? And I'm just going, that's not what they are. These are intentional. These are good. The government likes them. The government wants them. The government makes money off of them, which is subject to the new book. And tax-free wealth. I wanted to make taxes accessible, tax planning accessible to the average person. That's really what I was after.
So I want to unpack a few things from what you just said before we move into the new book. Your ability to express exactly what needs to be said in a really concise way is an absolute gift and a skill that has been fine-honed over time for people that go, I wish I could maybe sound or talk more like Tom. You can, but you have to be listening to the way in which he phrases things. He goes against the grain a little bit. He calls things out that he goes, wait a minute, it shouldn't be this way, right? Your accountant shouldn't be afraid of the IRS. should be wanting to be a partner with them. It's not about necessarily the taxes being negative. It's how do I make them positive? Like that phrasing is so powerful. And then it leads to a book that becomes as well regarded and well known as it is today. And that to me, again, is a great just segue into the next chapter of what you are looking to do from a content production standpoint, accelerate your mission, your vision for the world. And let's talk about that, because we talked about that at our private mastermind just a few weeks ago. And I said, hey, I got my dream client council behind me. It was a really cool experience. I brought Tom in and I had all my top clients behind us and we're listening and we're vibing. But you said some things there that I really would like to just kind of bring back up in the context of this book and really what it's meant to do for the modern entrepreneur, but also for the accounting professional that's working with the modern entrepreneur today, and how you're looking to position that relationship as well as their understanding of the tax code through this new book. So just tell us again about that mission and that vision you have and how that ties into your new book.
Thank you. So I think the accounting profession is underutilized, and I think it's our fault. Okay, I don't think that's anybody else's fault. We've commoditized our own profession, which is I think the sin of all sins. To take your own profession and say we're not professionals, we're just doing tax returns, we're just doing financial statements, we're doing compliance work. That, by the way, the value to the client is roughly zero, right? I mean, literally zero. The client does not want a tax return. They would never have a tax return prepared unless they had to do it because the government required them to do it. So I've always felt like we were underserving our community. I felt that from when I first started my first CPA firm. My goal when I started the CPA firm, I had two goals. One was to create an environment where people loved coming to work. That was actually number one. And number two was to serve entrepreneurs and investors at a level they'd never been served before. And by that, what I meant was I found in the Big Four that for the most part, they really serve at a very high level. I mean, I'll admit I am a bit of a Big Four snob. I'm a fan. I was at Ernst & Young and I'm a fan of Ernst & Young to this day. Okay. One of my friends from National Tax became the CEO worldwide of Ernst & Young and Mark Weinberger. And I think they do a good job. I think the average CPA does a terrible job. I think the big firms, not the Big Four, but the consolidated firms are awful.
They are terrible.
I think they're absolutely awful. I call them Cheesecake Factory firms because they have a really big menu and a lot of calories at a very average price. So average production at an average price. Okay, great. But is that who you want to be? You know, that's the question. And I look at the smaller CPA firm, 50 professionals and under, and I'm going, we have an opportunity. I certainly think the best CPAs are either at the Big Four or at the under 50. I truly believe. I mean, there's the odd one that's in between, but they end up at the Big Four on their own. I mean, in the end, the best always end up one of those two places. So I'm going, let's figure out how do we better serve our clients? How do we actually produce the kind of results that the Big Four produces for its very wealthy clients? How do we produce them for our moderately wealthy clients or our middle-class clients, for our entrepreneur clients? How do we do that? And how do we take the profession to a new level where 90%, instead of it being 20% of our work is consulting and 80% is compliance, how do we get to 80% consulting and 20% compliance?
I love it. And I largely agree with your beliefs on just the Big Four for a reason. And I think a lot of people kind of look at that either with maybe some jealousy or envy. And whenever I find envy, I always say you need to be fiercely curious instead. What is allowing people to pay the rates that they do to those firms? And it wouldn't come along if there wasn't some form of a premium result or a premium experience. And while we don't necessarily remotely have any of us on this call, even all of us combined, the resources of any of the Big Four, we can still learn from them. And there was a quote I heard earlier today that I think is really applicable to this particular aspect of this conversation, which is you don't have to like someone to learn from them. True. And I love that expression, which is, again, it's like, I don't necessarily like a lot of the practices in the Big Four or even some of the people that are involved with it, but I will learn from them regardless. And I think that is something that you and I share, which is there are sources of inspiration and education all around us. And if we're simply willing to have the rose-tinted glasses, I have the same approach. It's like we have to be positive on behalf of our clients, especially in times of uncertainty. And we want to give them that certainty by how we're able to express and explain complex topics like tax code and why it isn't actually negative, despite everyone telling you it is, and why they aren't loopholes, and why they can actually help build a win-win relationship with Big Papa, right? With the government. So let's talk a little bit more about the book itself, because again, we're going to drop the link down below. If you guys have read his previous book, Tax-Free Wealth, you got to get this one. If you haven't read Tax-Free Wealth, get that one and this one, right? Grab both of them, because they are, again, quintessential reads for what I'll just, again, say the modern CPA who has a bright vision for the future and wants to share that with their clients and with their team and staff as well. So let's talk about how to win and create a win-win relationship with the government. So again, talking a little bit more about the book itself.
Yeah. So the title of the book is The Win-Win Wealth Strategy: 7 Investments the Government Will Pay You to Make. And to go back to the previous theme about what we're trying to do with the profession, you and I, frankly, because we're on the same page here for sure, is, we have so much experience with so many clients, so many successful clients. We've seen a lot of success. We've seen a lot of failure. And so it's pretty easy for us if we take the time to go, okay, what's made them successful? And one of the things, people ask, well, why would I listen to a CPA about building wealth? Okay, yes, I get it for managing money, but why would I seek their advice for building wealth? I'm going, well, because the tax law is really an instruction guide to building wealth. That's really what it is. And if you look at, so we took 7 segments of the economy, starting with business, followed by real estate, technology, agriculture, and a few others. And what we did was we looked at, all right, so what does the government get out of these incentives? And what does the taxpayer get out of these incentives? And the government actually, in 6 of the 7, makes a boatload of money in 6 of the 7 investments. Everything, by the way, except retirement plans, which is the one that's readily accepted by the rest of the world. That's the one where the government actually just pretty much breaks even. And we run numbers, and I'm going, let's just run numbers. We're an accountant. I'm an accountant. I'm going to run numbers. And so I ran numbers, actually took a simple strategy, said, what does the government get out of it? And I took the strategy and say, what does the taxpayer get out of it? Well, what's interesting is both can win. It's like, people tend to think of the tax law as a win-lose, right? It's a zero-sum game. If the government wins, I lose. If I win, the government loses. So the only way for me to win is to cheat. Then I win and the government loses. I'm going, no, that is not how it works. The reason that really wealthy people, now people who make a lot of money pay a lot of tax. We all know that. But people who build a lot of wealth pay very little tax. And that distinction is a very important distinction. And so you notice the name of the book is The Win-Win Wealth Strategy, not the win-win income strategy, because it's not an income strategy, it's a wealth strategy. The rule is the more assets I build, the less tax I pay. And this is the fundamental message of the book is, look, you're an investor, you have a partner. It's called the US government, okay? You have another partner called the state government. The US government's your big partner, right? Whether you like it or not. You look at your pay stub and it says FICA and it says withholding. You go, who the heck are these guys that are taking money out of my paycheck? And you're going, oh, obviously I have a partner in my income stream, right? Well, the question is, are you a silent partner or are you an active partner? Most people, 90% of the population, they're silent partners. They said, well, I can't tell you how many times a prospective client comes to me or a student comes to me and says, my accountant said I should just be glad to pay more tax because look at all the money I'm making. I'm going, are you crazy? That all that tells me is your accountant has no fundamental understanding of how the tax law actually works, or they're not interested in learning how to apply it for your benefit, because that is not how the tax law works. The way the tax law works is if you're an active if you're an active partner with the government, in other words, you go, what does the government want done? Okay, let's take business. They want jobs. Okay, so if I build a business with jobs, anything that I pay to my employees, I don't have to pay tax on. They do, but I don't. And so I'm not paying tax on money I put back into my business. Well, I mean, literally, you pay no tax on money you put back into your business. Doesn't matter what you're putting it back into. You can put it back into equipment and you're not paying tax on it because you get 100% bonus depreciation. Okay. And after this year, it'll be 179. We're back to 179, right? But right now we got 100% bonus depreciation. If I put it into real estate, guess what? I get bonus depreciation. I don't get taxed on the money that I reinvest into the economy. As long as it's a direct investment and not a derivative investment, which is what the stock market is. The stock market is a derivative investment. That doesn't help, investing in the stock market, I guess tangentially helps the economy, but not directly. I mean, all you're doing is trading a derivative. That's all you're doing. Whereas if you actually create a company, now you're actually directly impacting the economy. You're directly impacting jobs. You're directly impacting whatever area is your business, right? I mean, you have a direct impact. If you create new technology, I mean, look at Amazon and Tesla didn't pay tax for like 20 years, both of them. Why not? Well, because of tax incentives. Some of it's because they had losses, but then the rest of it was they had the big R&D tax credits, right? And so you go, well, okay, well, what does that tell me? It tells me that the government really wants to promote that. So why not take that knowledge and say, look, if the government's going to be a partner with me anyway, why don't I just find out where I can be the best partner with the government and make the most money? Because the reality is nobody's ever going to reach their dreams paying high taxes. It's not mathematically possible.
If you can't tell how passionate he is about this topic, it was pretty obvious right there. And again, wealth of knowledge and so many great salient points that I want everyone to take from this and start to wrap into your conversations. And again, get the book, dive deeper into these topics. You're not going to be able to just pick this up from hearing this stuff once. This is the type of thing that you should study. It's the type of thing that premium clients want to hear, that Absolutely. They want to understand before they invest in you. So again, it's like, make sure that this isn't something that's just one and done. Commit this stuff to memory, bring it into your repertoire, and just, right, like 3 ones that I wrote down. I'm learning things here. Silent partner versus active partner with the government. Which would you prefer to be? Active partner, of course, because when you're active, what do you get? You get more results from it. Silent partners aren't going to really benefit from it. Another big one. What does the government want? Such an easy thing to be like, well, do you know what the government wants from you? What a great question to be able to ask and be like, well, why don't we make sure we give them what they want? And then you know what's crazy about that? You're going to get a lot of stuff that you want as well from them. That sounds pretty interesting, right? Great way to tie that into your marketing and sales conversations. And then I love this one too. Direct investments versus derivative investments. You want to help the economy. You want to be able to ultimately make sure that your investments are something that benefit lots of people. Let's talk about a direct investment versus derivatives. So much amazing pieces of information that just came from that one opening soliloquy on the book. And I can only imagine what happens when I crack this sucker open. So
let me, if I can, talk about the book a little bit, because I think this book, a lot of times clients and CPAs are hesitant. I hear people hesitant to talk about tax reduction and tax savings. Oh, the government doesn't really want that. I'm going to be patriotic and pay my taxes. I'm going, so are you more patriotic if the government makes more money, if the government makes less money? To me, I'm more patriotic if the government makes more money. Well, the government makes way more money if I do what they want me to do. And that's what I did in the book, was to show that. And what I'm saying is look, take this book, show it to your clients and say, look, see, this is what the government wants done. It's pretty simple here. It's laid out. The government makes money. We make money. you make money. This is a win-win. Why wouldn't you do it? So this is a way to get that tax planning conversation started where you can actually use my words. They don't have to even believe you anymore, right? Now you can use me as the authority and say, look, here you go. See, Tom Wheelwright says tax-free wealth, Robert Kiyosaki, blah, 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 blah. And here, see, it proves it right here.
Yeah, and it's such a good point. And when we talk about the inversion of the 80-20, right? 80% compliance, 20% consulting, sometimes you need a spark to really move you further into the consulting side of the conversation. And that spark, right? Like, we're big on personal development. We're big on making sure that people can start to change their lives by changing how they act and behave. And so we're huge fans of Atomic Habits. And I give that book out all the time. I recommend it all the time. And it starts just a tiny spark of, well, maybe if I start to do things a little bit differently, I'll start to get these really different, profound results that I'm really excited or interested in. Oh, well, if I really want to start to get away from more compliance work, maybe if I just start to, anytime I have a conversation with a client or someone that I really want to work with, I just mention this book. Or maybe I take it one step further and I send them a copy of this book and I say, you know what, we're really different in how we approach this, but this book gives you a good idea of the type of relationships we'd like to build with you. Little signed cards, shoot it out. How different are you now compared to the next accounting firm that they may interview or talk to, right? Like you're leagues apart just by having that little bit of thoughtfulness and maybe like a $20 investment to secure a client that's now going to be interested in doing more consulting work with you and less compliance work with you. It's just, again, it's like, let's not be penny wise and pound foolish. This is such a great way to move in this direction.
And of course, our biggest source of new revenue are existing clients, right? So if we look at those existing clients and go, what's my relationship with them? What are we doing from a consulting standpoint? And the challenge that we have is people, and I've had this experience before, right? Current clients, they'll say, well, why didn't you tell me this before? Okay. So this is where having an outside authority is really useful. Say, well, look, here's a book, brand new, and it illustrates a different way to look at taxes. Just take a look at it. Let me know what you think. Okay. Is this something you'd like to pursue? And then because I think our number one job, is to give clients a choice. I think that is our number one job. And if we don't give them the information, they don't have a choice. Well, this is an opportunity to give them a choice as to how they work with us. I give you a perfect example. I've got a good friend that very well known. I'm not at liberty to say who it is, but you would know his company very, very well. And he heard me the first time. He said, oh, I should go hire Tom. And then he thought, you know what? No, I need to give my current accountant a chance, and I need to change my relationship with my current accountant. And that's all and so he took that initiative after hearing me speak that, look, what's your relationship with your accountant? You need to change that relationship. Well, good for him. I rarely have people who do that, right? But how much easier would it be for us to say, would you be interested in a different kind of relationship that created a win-win pattern as opposed to this win-lose pattern?
Yeah. And I, as you were talking through that, again, it's like, I go back to that example you gave, which is so common in terms of just the way people will think about taxes. And it's like, if I pay more in taxes, my accountant says I'm doing a good job, right? But it's like, you can't change that type of relationship, right? If it's like they're trying to pat you on the back and say, hey, that's a good thing. It's not the same thing as being able to say, actually, you know what? It's good that you are paying taxes, right? But we want to make sure that we're doing it in a way that ultimately benefits you the most, because it's the difference between wealth and income, right? And again, that fine distinction, and this is again a larger part of marketing, sales, whether it's with new prospective clients or ascending your existing clients, is you've got to be very clear with your language. And notice that is something that Tom has done again and again as a part of this interview. It's what's the difference between these two things? And if your clients don't quite understand the difference, it's incumbent upon you, again, to either create that spark, be willing to have that conversation, and for you yourself to be clear on those differences.
Yeah, let me give you a couple more if I can, Tyler. One is I hear a lot of particularly financial planners, they talk about tax efficient investing. I find that to be a complete waste of time and energy. But what about tax effective investing? Really, we just moderated that term a little bit, but now we're saying we're not making it tax efficient. In other words, we're not saying we're going to pay less tax just on the money we earn. We're making it tax effective, meaning we're not going to pay, not pay tax on the money we earn. We're not going to pay tax on other money we earn. That's a tax effective investing strategy. Let me give you one more. People always ask the question is, look at my mug. Okay. Is this deductible? Is this deductible? I said, how about if we change the question and change it to, how do I make it deductible? Now, none of us can answer the question, is it deductible? Because always the answer to that is, well, it depends. But we should all be able to answer the question, how do I make it deductible? Because really what I find with entrepreneurs, they don't care what they can't do. They only care how to do, they just want to learn how to do what they want to do, right? So what they really want to know is, they don't want to know, is it deductible? They want to know, how can I make it deductible? They just can't, they haven't learned how to phrase it that way. So our job is to ask better questions.
I agree. It's to ask better questions because you can't tell, I always say you can't tell an entrepreneur anything. You have to ask them questions that will naturally guide their thought process to what you would like them to understand. They go, Tyler, they don't understand my value. And I go, well, let's go through a little bit of a sales role play, right? Let me understand your value. And then they don't ask me questions, right? They don't want to understand my insights. They don't want to learn more about me. They don't want to guide me to do you understand the difference between something that's tax effective versus something that is, tax efficient, right? Like, do you understand the difference between that? And I'd be like, no, I don't really know. It's like, well, let me help you out. Would you like to know? It's like, I'd love to know. Like, what's the difference? And so again, it's like just this, right? I would love to do another 3 hours with Tom where he just shares those insights of how he's using language to create value, to create an understanding, to create a result for that prospective client. Because I mean, again, this is a masterclass as far as I'm concerned right now. So I can't wait to get this book.
So I got to tell you a quick story. So I had a client once, and that literally hired me to interpret what her attorney was saying. Literally, I mean, she said, I want you there. There was no other reason for me to be there. I didn't need to be there otherwise. She said, I want you there because I never understand what my attorney's saying, but I understand what you say. So could you please be there and interpret for me and then tell me what the attorney's saying?
This goes back to another saying that I absolutely just love. And it's a quote from Warren Buffett, but it ties perfectly into this, which is accounting is the language of business. And I always like to tell the story of, hey, if I dropped you into mainland China and you spoke no Mandarin, do you think you'd have a good time? No, you'd have a terrible time. It'd be awful. You'd be lucky to just, to have an okay time. But if I gave you a translator that knew the lay of the land, knew how to speak the language, took you to the best locations, made sure that you were safe, secure, and had a fantastic time, do you think that would be a better choice? And the answer is, of course it is. But it is incumbent upon, again, the entrepreneurial accountant to understand these analogies, these little stories, these meaningful tidbits that get across really complex topics. And then you become, again, the most trusted profession for a reason. You get invited into these high value conversations with a lawyer where it's just like, I need you here to make sure that this is exactly, that I understand it. And that is a very important skill to want to develop to become more valuable. And it comes from, again, listening to people who've already successfully done this type of behavior. So again, just wanted to give a shout out. So Tom, am I allowed to ask you to share one of the strategies from the book? Because I know there's 7, but I'm a big fan of, I don't like spoilers, but I do like getting at least a little bit of a taste. So you got one that you'd be willing to share with the audience?
Yeah, no, of course. I'm happy to walk through them because you hear them, you go, well, of course that's true. That's why I hear about accountants who read tax rule. They go, well, yeah, I knew that. Well, why don't you say it then? Okay, I'll have somebody come to me and say, well, I gave your book to my accountant. My accountant said, well, yeah. And so then the client's going, well, why aren't you doing it then? Okay. So, I mean, for example, take real estate. One of the 7 investments is real estate, huge tax benefits. Real estate doesn't work without debt. Real estate does not work without debt. And this is a very important point. It's a very short piece in the book, but probably one of the most important pieces in the book is when I talk about the value of debt and the reason the government incentivizes debt. Remember that debt is money. Okay. In fact, all money is debt. Okay. So every time the bank loans money, they're actually creating new money. Okay. We don't think of it that way. We think, well, they're lending my money. No, they're creating new money. Okay. So if that's the case, and the way to expand the money supply is to lend more. The reason the Fed's raising interest rates is to reduce the money supply because people will borrow less if they have higher interest rates, right? That's the theory anyway. So the idea here is, well, wait a minute, not only do we get leveraged returns on our investment with debt, but think about the tax leverage we get with debt. So real estate, for example, let's say I have $100,000. Well, I have a choice. I could buy $100,000 of real estate, or I could buy $500,000 of real estate, right? That's my choice. I could pay $100,000 cash for that real estate, and I'd get a deduction probably of about 20 grand. Or I could buy $500,000 of real estate and get a deduction of about 100 grand. Okay, so which would you rather have? So the tax consequences of debt are enormous. It's really, debt and real estate go together. Then, take real estate, then you can add business into your real estate, and then you can add solar energy on top of your real estate. I mean, the magic in the 7 investments is actually getting 7 investments to work together. And that's the magic that we need to do with our clients is we need to take the 7 investments, say, look, it's not one investment, is how do we get these 7 investments or 3 of these 7 investments or 4 of these 7 investments to work together in order to get where we want to go. And we just have to choose which investment's right for us, because the reality is not everybody wants to invest in real estate. Not everybody wants to invest in business. Not everybody wants to invest in agriculture. So choose. Okay. One of our jobs is to help the client understand what their choices are and help them make a good choice.
Yeah, there's, again, so many great things to unpack from that. But again, understanding the choices. And again, we have to understand the choices. And then we have to be able to easily articulate the choices so that it doesn't get confusing and turn into technobabble. And again, if the client already has a good starting point, right? If you're working from relatively the same base of knowledge, right? That makes the conversation how much easier to have and how much easier are they to retain the information when you get into that consulting type of engagement and you start to have these types of dialogues. But another point here that I love, which is again, the 7 investments working together. I think that so many entrepreneurs, and this is again, what our audience is primarily looking to work with. One of the biggest problems with entrepreneurs is always kind of, what's the next shiny thing, right? How do I go and get the next thing? And yeah, but now we actually get to say, no, it's not the next thing. It's like, what if we could just really funnel your energy, your focus into things that build wealth, work well with the government wants them, and it allows you to continue to expand your vision and complete your mission, right? Like, what if we could do that? How exciting would that be, right? Like, no, we're not talking tax returns right now. We're talking about something that's totally different. Some people aren't going to be interested in that. And guess what? I'm not interested in working with those people, right? Like that's a very important distinction that you have to just internalize. If someone's like, well, I don't really want to do that. It's like, okay, great. Good luck. There's plenty of other people out there who are still looking to do that compliance thing, I think. Hopefully not, but maybe. And one more thing, and I just want to close a loop on this. So when I said you don't have to like someone to learn from them, I mentioned that earlier. And first of all, I love Tom. Everyone here should love Tom. So you should definitely like people and learn from them. But there's a guy that gets a lot of hate online. And to be fair, I'm not a fan, but he went from effectively, I'll say relatively broke to a billionaire in about 10 to 15 years. And his name's Grant Cardone. And he literally just aggressively leverages the main thing that Tom just shared with us here, which is debt is a form of money. It is something that the government is interested in. It is something that they want to continue to develop as more real estate, more investment in infrastructure. They want that thing to happen. And one guy just said, you know what, I'm just going to do this and I'm going to literally abuse it. I'm going to break it. I'm going to make it work so well for me that it's going to catapult my wealth to something, again, not income, wealth, to $1 billion in 10 years. And that's a story. Again, it's like, you don't have to like this guy, but this is what one of these 7 things is capable of producing when you do it the right way. Powerful stuff. So I want to make sure that while we have at least 10 minutes here, where can we get the book? Tom,
I would, frankly, I'd go to Amazon. Amazon's the easiest place to go. Barnes and Noble. We have our own website, winwinwealthstrategy.com, but Amazon is probably the easiest. Click on Amazon. It's right there. It's ready for pre-order, and you can pre-order it right now.
Excellent. And since I know that most people like me love when the link is provided, I went ahead and just dropped that into the Zoom chat. I'm also going to just jump over to Facebook right now, and I'm going to drop that into the chat as well. So guys, the link is down below. When we put this out on YouTube, it's going to be down below as well. I'm not getting anything from this, just to be totally clear. This is just, I know that this is something that will benefit you. And I really want to make sure that you get the tools and the resources and knowledge that help you move further into an established expert. So Tom, we got 10 minutes here, assuming that's okay with you. You got some extra time here. So is there anything else you'd like to say about the book before we just kind of maybe take some questions from the audience, or anything else that you'd like to share?
Yeah, just a little teaser. The last chapter of the book is how to get the government to pay for your Ferrari. And this is a true story. I love this story. It's a true story. It's one of my clients, Brad Sumrock, who's a big real estate educator. He's pretty well known. And I knew that Brad was looking for a Ferrari. And I said, well, let's run some numbers here. And so we literally ran numbers, and you'll have to read the book to get that chapter. But literally, the government paid for his Ferrari. The government, and it's actually currently, because this is a Ferrari he bought last year. So this is like brand new. I was writing that. I'm going, I need this example. I knew Robert Kiyosaki and I had done this example with his Porsche, but I'm going, okay, let's see if we can get a Ferrari, because I think Ferrari's better. And I like Ferraris better than Porsches. So I said, and I knew Brad was getting a Ferrari. I said, well, let's see if we can get the government to pay for this. And sure enough, we ran the numbers, and absolutely the government's paying for his Ferrari. So it's and the point is not that the government wants you to have a Ferrari. The point is that the government so much wants you to do these 7 investments that if you do them the way they want you to do them, you'll have enough money to pay for a Ferrari. Okay. And the government will provide those funds. Okay. Money that you would otherwise have paid in taxes will now pay for your Ferrari. So I did see we had an interesting question here, and I'd like to address that if that's okay, and kind of talk about tax effective versus tax efficient investing. So if you think about tax efficient investing, so a municipal bond would be tax efficient investing because you're not paying tax on that interest income, right? But it's not really tax effective because all it's doing is eliminating tax on that income. But take real estate. So if I go buy that $500,000 of property, right? Now I say I make $100,000 in my business, and I take that $100,000 and I combine it with $400,000 of debt. I end up with this bonus depreciation of $100,000 roughly. It's typically probably more than that, but let's take it $100,000. Well, that's income that I earned in my business that's not taxable. That's not the real estate income that's not taxable. The real estate's income is not going to be taxable anyway because future depreciation is going to offset it. But the income, so it's not the income, that's tax efficient investing, is the income from the real estate is not taxed. Okay. Tax effective investing is my other income isn't taxed either. So I'm actually taking an investment that reduces my my other taxable income, not just the taxable income from that specific investment. So real estate's one of those areas where I can take the money, I can put it into real estate, and I can then not pay tax on the money that I earned in my business. To me, that's tax effective investing.
Yeah, and again, it's being able to sometimes just tiny shifts in language, again, will create new ways for us to think about it, to express and explain things to clients. And there's just to tie in a small marketing concept, right? It's like, what's the new way versus the old way? How are things historically or traditionally done versus what's the most, again, effective way to do something? And when you start to, again, just change this dialogue a little bit, your dialect, to be more specific, people will think of you differently. They will think of your services differently. So that's a great question. I've got a question myself, Tom, for you. Yeah. I think a lot of people love the idea of transitioning into being more in this kind of speaker realm and in this high level consultant realm, right? Like they really like the idea of this, but what was maybe, I guess, the straw that broke the camel's back, or what was the clear calling to make the transition? What really said to you that this was something that you just had to do?
First of all, I'll tell everybody, don't do it.
That's right.
Seriously, this is one of the hardest skill sets to acquire. And it's taken me 20 years to acquire this skill set. So this is, I've been in the business 40 years. The first 20 years, I thought I was a good teacher when I was at Ernst & Young. I did. I was a terrible teacher compared to what I am now. Because what I learned was, and I give a lot of credit to Mr. Kiyosaki. So here's what it takes. Okay. So I'm on stage with Robert and there's 2,000 people in the audience. And I'm starting to do some numbers and he goes, stop. Says, people don't understand what you're talking about. He's saying this to me on mic in front of 2,000 people. Okay. I'll give you another one. He invited me he said, you want all the rich dad advisors to do TED Talks. He says, I want you to come up with your TED Talk and then I want you to bring an audience. So I brought my staff and had spent 2 weeks preparing this. This is 6 or 7 years ago. And I spent 2 weeks preparing this TED Talk. I'd probably gone 3 minutes in and he said, stop. He says, you got to get rid of everything except for that video. I'm going, excuse me? He says, and he just ripped on me. And literally it took us 4 hours and he let my staff, he says, what do you think? What does he need to do? And I let my staff criticize me. And I'm going, that's what it takes. So this is not something that you get into casually is what I would say. That's the first thing I say. You really, it's pretty clear I care about this stuff, right? You have to really care about it because I'm just saying it's really hard work. And can anybody do it? Probably. If you got 20 years to spend, working at it, but it does take practice and it takes, this is why I go back to my mission days. You can't be afraid of being rejected because you are going to be rejected.
Yeah. And again, it's having a mentor of that caliber who will give it to you straight and simply just knows the ropes of that type of industry is not something a lot of people have access to in any meaningful way. And again, it's a hard path to take, but it can be a worthwhile one. And even I would argue just the skill of developing the willingness to speak on camera, right? We don't necessarily need paid engagements all the time, but I'm getting ready to create a piece of content around, what's the number one thing that a premium client wants to see? And it's you and your expertise on display, right, but in a digestible and presentable way. And I think Tom did a great job of just saying it takes time and iterations and refinement and taking feedback and you can't take it personally. You have to go, is this going to help me get closer to the end result, which is helping someone, which is right. Like, as long as I'm authentic about that's what I want to do in my zone of genius, whatever that is for you, tax planning, right? Cost segregation studies, whatever it is, and you really want to get deep into that, well, you're going to get, what was it? Ripped to shreds. Is that what you said? It's going to happen.
No, there's no question. And I would just say, you know what? You have to be willing to fail. If you get good at a video game, you don't get good at a video game playing it once. You've got to be, and that's the great thing about video games, right? They teach you that it's okay to fail. They teach that's what I like about video games. And I remember early on when I decided, my partner and I decided that I would speak. Okay, because I like to teach, and so that's why. Because I love to teach, and I bought a package from somebody who said, I'll get you on 10 radio. I'll give you 10 radio shows to be, do 3-minute interviews on 10 radio shows. 3 minutes is not a very long time. So you know, what happens is you start getting concise in your language and a lot more precise in your language. And that's what I think we owe it to our clients. I hear people, I hear accountants on stage and they're teaching, doing these continuing education, and they have this false idea that if I know my subject, then I have a right to teach this. No, you don't. You don't have the right to teach it until you're a professional instructor. Then you have a right to teach it. But it's a skill set. People deserve better. They deserve better speakers. They deserve better instruction. They deserve better education than they're getting.
I couldn't agree more wholeheartedly with that. And it does take time to develop it, but just be willing to listen to your audience. And more importantly, listen to your dream client, because quite frankly, they're the only opinion that matters. And listen, we are at the top of the hour here. So that is pretty much going to conclude our interview. But one last time, again, the link for the new book is in the description down below. There's so many other amazing things that we could take time to unpack. We're definitely going to have Tom back if he's willing to have us, because again, this has been amazing. Just an absolute wealth of information, a wealth of ability. Get it? Wealth ability. But Tom, do you have anything else that you'd like to say before we close out today's interview?
Only thing I'd like to wrap up with is that you can do this with your clients. Taxes, conceptually, we think, well, taxes are so difficult, but they're only difficult because we start small and we get smaller. Okay. Clients don't want to hear the small stuff. They want to understand, how does it actually work? What do I need to do? So we can do all the complex stuff ourselves. That's our job. But let's simplify it for the clients. And that's why I write books like Tax-Free Wealth and Win-Win Wealth, is because the idea is that here's a simple way to portray it. And I'm giving you the tools to portray this to your clients. I'm very happy for you to do this with your clients. Take these tools, use these tools, because then everybody's better off. The world is better off. Entrepreneurs, I'm a huge fan of entrepreneurs, and we help entrepreneurs win. I always say, our tagline is better clients, better practice, better life. I think it's in that order.
Couldn't agree more. And listen, this has been, again, absolutely fantastic. Everyone, please go get this book, pre-order it. If it's available right now, order it, Amazon.com. Again, this is Tom Wheelwright, author of Win-Win Wealth Strategy and 7 highly effective things that will allow you to partner with the government and ultimately grow your wealth. So thank you again so much, Tom. For anyone else that wants to check things out, you got all sorts of resources down below. And always remember that only you can create your dream firm, but we, including Tom Wheelwright, are here to help you every single step of the way. Have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your workday, everyone. And again, thank you so much to you, Tom. Have a great day.
Thank you.